The series is over, but we're not quite done. We are the AfterBuzz TV Voltron Legendary Defender After Show, and we're here to talk to you guys about Season 8 as a whole. We're going to talk about character arcs. We're going to talk about the end of reality. We're going to talk about some of our favorite moments, and we're going to talk about them with two very special guests. So let's get this ball rolling, and team, it's time to form Voltron. Hello everyone, welcome back. We are the AfterBuzz TV Voltron Legendary Defender After Show. This is the Season 8 review. We are going to talk about Season 8 as a whole. We are going to have a grand old time doing it. I have with me Green Lion Megan Salinas.
Hey everybody!
I'm Black Lion Katie Cullen. And we have two wonderful, fantastic returning guests that we are so thrilled to have in studio. Our showrunners, Laura Montgomery and Joaquim dos Santos.
How's it going?
Woo!
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're happy to be back and talking about the final season.
Yeah, and we have to sort of give a pre-warning that we haven't really watched it in a while, so we're not really sure what Season 8 is anymore.
Yeah. I refreshed myself on the episode thumbnails on Netflix, so at least I have like a
And they spoiled
slight
everything
reminder.
No, just me.
Oh, okay.
Things I will never be over when Netflix marketing screws up that badly. Well, welcome back.
Yeah,
Before we get started, we are going to do a little bit of housekeeping. As always, we have the live chat going. For those of you who are watching live on YouTube, we have the hashtag. For those of you who are watching live or listening later, that hashtag on Twitter is ABTVVoltron. If you've got something to say, throw it in the hashtag, throw it in the live chat. You may well get a shout out. I will say that we do check the hashtag throughout the week, and it lasts longer than the live chat does. So art, links, fun stuff, throw it in there if you want it to be a little more permanent. And as always, we have our Tavern of Lions house rule. Be nice or get out. There we go. Yeah.
Lazy.
Everyone has opinions. I firmly believe that you can express your opinions in a respectful manner, and if you find yourself unable to do that, you will be banned from the channel. No more AfterBuzz animation for you. Bye-bye.
Wow.
Most of you have been pretty dang good at that, which I appreciate. Keep it up, and we will continue. Season 8, though, you guys.
Oh
the
my
series
goodness.
finale. What was releasing this last season like for you?
It was,
Exhausting?
yeah. Releasing it was real easy because we were like out of,
It's done.
out of work
Yeah,
for like
yeah.
a month. We were like, yeah, man, we were relaxing. We were kind of like, things were nice and slow. Making it was a whole different scenario. This was where we really procrastinated a lot on a few things. Like, we thought we had this beautiful idea that we'd have all this time at the end where there's no new episodes coming up that we have to make, and like we'll have all this time to like reboard all these things that need to be reboarded and focus all this attention.
Right.
And we had none of that time, and I don't even know how that happened. I think what we forgot to realize was doing our regular producer duties takes the whole day. And the end of the day was when we did all our storyboard stuff.
I don't know how the math worked in our head, but I think we assumed that like as soon as season 7 was done, we reverted back to being like storyboard artists or something, and that we'd just be like, yeah, we'll just like draw and stuff again.
Yeah, we'll have all this time to just like
did
make
not come to pass.
the finale the best it can be. Like,
Yeah.
I remember us talking with Eugene, like, oh my god, Eugene, when we're done with like this last batch of episodes, can you imagine how much time? And he's like, yeah, it's gonna be so great. And then like it was none of that because we were still making the freaking show and finishing like episodes just in editing and in post.
The balancing act was still happening.
Yeah.
We had like 3 spinning plates at a time.
One day I'm gonna figure it out.
Sending it in at 11:59 before it's due.
We're gonna be like 80-year-olds, like, we figured it out.
Yeah,
And they're
and
like,
then
what
I'll
is
be
this
like-
crazy old person doing here trying to make a cartoon?
Yeah.
That's what we're all trying to do. Collectively, we're making a cartoon.
That's right.
So you had a lot of story threads to bring together and resolve, as well as a lot of new information to give us. Was there anything that got lost in the shuffle? Was there anything you would have liked to emphasize a little more that there just wasn't time for it?
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's tough. We had this massive Honerva backstory to sort of really set up and queue up, and we were able to do that a little bit sort of leading up, but not. Season 8 was really our big push to get that all set up. I think, that came at the cost of, like, I would have loved to have spent more time with the MFE pilots and sort of figure out what made them tick. And we got a little bit of that with, like day
Yeah.
47, but
Yeah.
I don't know. There was stuff like that, like incidental side characters that we were super
Yeah.
fond of.
Yeah, it's one of those really tricky things about having a show this big is you introduce all these characters, and we had all these great ideas of like they're all going to come into play in these many different ways, and so we'd be kind of in the writers' room with the writers like talking about all these things, and then slowly but surely, as we needed to just kind of whittle it down and make it understandable and get the strongest points across, like these little things would fall away, and so suddenly you'd lose that kind of side character involvement.
Right.
Like we had this idea of like Slav was going to kind of be with them and figuring out all of this like crazy inner reality traveling stuff, and like he would know all the realities and he would know exactly where to go. He'll be in the cockpit with us. It's going to be crazy.
Right.
And then we're like, oh no, we need to just like, do we really need Slav in the finale?
Yes.
Right.
Like,
Yes,
with
you do.
all the paladins. Like we love him, but that might be a little awkward. So yeah, and
Yeah,
honestly, just like the finale itself, just that last episode, like we've always, with every finale we've done, in our three like big seasons, we Zarkon we consider to be one season, Lotor is the second season, and then this big like Sendak Earth / Honerva arc. Each of those had a big finale, and every time we would write that big finale, and we would run out of time. Like, we would overwrite it.
Right.
And I would always try to say, like, guys, we need, like, at least an act of wrap-up. And then for the big series finale, like, it would have been awesome to have an entire episode where we could just dedicate to, like, tying up loose ends, but you can't do that. We wrote an episode, and then we got notes like, hey, there's only action in Act 1. Can we have action in Act 2 and 3? And we're like, no, we can't.
That's
we
the
got to
crazy
wrap up
thing.
78 episodes. This
Right.
isn't just a 26 episode wrap up. This is a 78 episode wrap up.
But when you look at that final episode, it really is just the first act of like fight stuff, and the rest is pretty much wrap up.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just saying to each other, we wished that the conversation in Limbo almost could have had its own episode.
It
Like,
could
how
have.
awesome would that have been to really like explore, deep dive into Honerva's POV and make that transition when she, sort of
Yeah.
decides to go along with Allura, sell that.
Yeah. It
but
was.
you
There's
sort
a
of
ton
deal.
of stuff that just hit the kind of cutting room floor storyboard wise, just because we didn't have the time, and so we're looking like it's a kids show technically still,
Right.
even though
Yeah.
we're trying to make it more than that. You have a scene that's basically an act long that's just in a white floaty space with people talking about like
Bigger emotional stuff. Yeah.
and letting that go any longer than that is just like, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Kids are sleeping right now.
Well, it's what's interesting though is that it seems like we're in a, I don't know, sort of social situation now where those types of shows are becoming more and more of a reality. And we were on this like weird precipice where we were always working on shows that were pushing the boundaries, and maybe Voltron was on the tipping point. It seems like now animation is it's broadening like every day.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll be able to see more shows that can like lean in and get really, really character centric and still have all the sci-fi like big action stuff to go along with it.
Yeah. I was telling
yeah.
Joaquim how, we were just talking about how during our time on Voltron, we started in a very specific point in the industry where we were very used to working inside of our Boys Toys animation box and trying to push the boundaries.
Right.
And those were literally the only jobs that were available to us because those were the only shows that studios had in animation. And during our time on Voltron, like Castlevania came out
Oh my gosh.
and changed the landscape. And now suddenly there's all these studios. Netflix opened its own studio here. We were making a show through DreamWorks for Netflix, and now we could have just gone straight to Netflix and made a show that was more geared towards like young adults and more. But
We were
that
like
wasn't
trying to
available to us when we
sneak
started.
it in the back door. Like, this is secretly a much deeper show, everybody.
But it's exciting that, because it's a reality that we didn't know if it would ever be
Right.
a thing, because we were working on Korra, And we would say to ourselves, like, this is the last time we're ever going to get this chance, you guys. Like, Cora's like a crazy creature where Nickelodeon knows they're not making it for kids. It has no toy tie-in. It has no consumer products tie-in. It's just meant to be kind of an art project at the studio. And so it was allowed to be this very mature, different show for an audience that they didn't really understand. And so when it was over, we're like, all right, well, back to the old ways. But, you know, we were prepared for it, and we definitely had more of like a fun, campy vibe to Voltron, but we still wanted to try to push those bigger
maximized as much
themes.
of the like sort of pathos and sort of hero's journey and sort of deep character, introspective stuff as we could. But you know, it's funny too because it just seems maybe even to ourselves, but it seemed like the lines got blurred even in how it was received by the fandom and received by even like the media outlets. It was sort of like on the cusp of being talked about, you know, with other shows that were way more mature, like, oh, the Game of Thrones of it all, and it's like, we can't.
We didn't kill that many people. Oh, we did kill that many people. We ended reality.
Right.
More people than Game of Thrones.
So we did. We pushed the boundaries.
Yeah, and we'd find ourselves getting compared to shows that, you know, were like live action shows where like, oh, they should have done it like this, and it's like that would be awesome if that were an option at all, like in any way. But us to consider our like little robot lion show being made, us trying to make this show for as many people as possible under the guidelines of a boys' toys show, it's never going to be able to have like quite the ability to push farther that like a live action like Walking Dead on AMC that's at 10 o'clock at night specifically for adults, where you don't have to worry about how are my kids going to interact.
If your kids are watching Walking Dead, you have other problems.
Either that or you're the best parent in the world.
Disagree.
Agree to disagree.
Agree.
But was it that sort of desire to push the boundaries that sort of resulted in this climax where, yeah, we have the big action set piece leading up to it, but ultimately the resolution is one that's brought up from empathy and understanding?
I think so. And I think I will say DreamWorks was incredibly patient with us with regards to us broaching a lot of these subjects. They were, you know, maybe still figuring things out in terms of how they would approach, you know, other topics that we can get into a little later. But I would say the finale is almost, I don't know, I don't want to say unlike anything that you would see in other like-minded shows, like let's say like Transformers or Power Rangers or something that like Voltron was by outward appearances being compared to. But it was something I think really exciting for us to be able to explore, because we did create villains and create heroes that worked within this very kind of like shades of gray spectrum. There was black, there was white, but we played in this really weird, morally ambiguous zone a lot of the time. And that was, I think, it's important for kind of audiences of every age group to see that.
And, you know, we also came from working on shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra, which very much pushed those boundaries as well, and were extremely groundbreaking for you know, children's programming. And it was, you know, not something that was coming out of Western animation.
No,
so I mean, I would say we learned an insane amount from Mike and Brian.
We just had to reverse engineer that into the Goofy Cat one. You know what I mean? That was our like little trick to the industry. It was like, how do we do all that cool stuff that we were able to do in those shows and sort of cram it into this package?
And honestly, like, a lot of it was just us knowing that our ability to like show everything on screen, like every type of representation we might have wanted to show, we might not get our way on everything, but at least through having these larger lessons, we can still push those messages of acceptance and of understanding and of like looking beyond. And you know, those are just important messages. I think like everyone kind of learns them in their life in their own way. And I don't know, like I was such a little like asshole kid that like I didn't understand empathy. I didn't understand why people cried when they were happy. I was like, why would you cry when you're happy?
Right,
like you're
right.
happy. And then of course now I'm the woman who watched a T-Mobile commercial today and friggin' cried. So
I want to know what this commercial was.
it was beautiful. I will describe it to you after because I don't want to
Okay.
take the time. But
Advertising other brands.
there are things that come through, I think, life experience and through learning. And our paladins had that kind of on steroids
Right.
with their whole Voltron journey.
Their journey, yeah.
So, to really show how that manifested and how they learned from it it's important. And I think it's just important for kids to see it, even if they're not there in their life yet, to know when they get there, they look back and like,
That was sort of
I saw
happening
that.
for that
Like,
character, yeah.
To be able to see it happen to someone else and someone that you're invested in because, oh, it's Lance, he's my favorite. And then you watch him grow from this brat
Right.
to the right arm of Voltron.
Right.
Like, yeah. Awesome. Actually, I think this is a good point to start talking about character arcs in
I
this
think
season.
so. Yeah.
Let's talk about Honerva.
Oh,
Let's talk about this horror terror. She is amazing and horrifying and not the villain I expected to make it to the very end. But here
Let
we
me
are.
ask you,
I'm
though,
impressed.
Were you at all sympathetic to her and her sort of cause and situation?
100%. It's so she was one of the most fascinating characters to watch because once she gets her memory back and she realized, contextually speaking, we as the audience find out who she is at the same time she does.
Right.
You slowly start to realize how much of this entire scenario she's responsible for, whether inadvertently or not.
Yeah.
And so it's so fascinating, watch her refusal to take responsibility for her part in it, but still desperately wanting that, the human connections that she was denied. Human, so to speak.
Sure.
I'll take.
I'll take it.
It's telling that the perfect world that she found to slot herself into is the dimension where she died. Where
She
this
was taken
whole
out of the equation.
Yeah, it's possible that it's a dimension where the comet never happened because Voltron was obviously a surprise.
Right.
The alliances were still there, but the giant robots were, you've brought this monster down upon us, what are you?
Right.
So it's telling that that's the perfect dimension that she found, is the one where she died super early on.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but to obtain the perfect world, she was also basically willing to kill infinite versions of her son and her husband in order to get what she deemed she was worthy of.
Well, that's sort of like the misdirected love, right? Like she was in one hand looking for the acceptance and the love of a family that she never had, but she was blind to everything else, all the other chaos that she was causing as a result. That to me is interesting. I feel,
it's an interesting character. It's not necessarily like the most like honorable by any means, but characters, when you can understand why they want it, but then you see them doing things that are absolutely unacceptable to get it, it's like it's wrong, but
Right.
you can kind of understand.
we're hearing crackle in our ears, everybody. That might be me. I'm just going to go ahead and put it on the floor.
It's probably
you.
mine.
It's your phone case doesn't like the table.
All right.
No,
Probably not.
seriously, it's super weird, and I'm pretty sure it's your phone case. Sorry, I was trying to do that silently, so
No,
I didn't interrupt you.
I'm just going to call attention to it. Please carry on. Sorry.
I don't know. We were talking about Honerva or something.
Great podcasting.
But there's something really incredible, like interesting to me about her kind of victim mentality, where she really won't accept that like a lot of this is her fault. She just looks at basically like she's lost her whole life. She's witnessed it, not knowing that it was hers, realizing, looking back on all the things she should have done differently, that she could have done differently, and it's kind of she's kind of trying to point that blame of like, well, if the quintessence hadn't she'll turn it on everyone except her,
Right.
even though she was right there, kind of diving into this whole quintessence research and bringing this whole thing about.
It's Voltron's fault.
But it was also cool. I think, one of the things that I was really surprised of in the room, I don't really remember how it came up, was the notion that when she shows up on this reality and then Voltron follows, they're like, why have you brought this like demon monster to our world? It's a crazy sort of flip of the script where really, Voltron was doing good, but in a lot of people's eyes, and it's in a certain people's eyes, it could be seen as
I mean, you wouldn't know.
bringing
You wouldn't know
chaos.
any
Well,
better.
Voltron was the road beast in that scenario.
That's right.
It's like, look at
Exactly.
this giant monstrosity that's going to wreak havoc on our planet.
Because Honerva parked hers out back.
Right.
She was smart enough to store it, off planet. Oink, oink.
And we were talking a little bit before this about, how there's this portion of the fandom that's like, how could you, like, justice for Lotor and where's his redemption and how could you kill him off? And obviously, we feel we're coming from a point of, he's gone so far off the deep end that death was really the only sort of salvation that he had on some level. But it's interesting that it was Lotor in that reality. There was a version of Lotor that was, unaffected and uncorrupted and doesn't come from that kind of horrific background that our Lotor did. That was in essence kind of kicked off everything being turned on Honerva's plans.
Yeah.
It really does highlight how a person's, the circumstances that they find themselves in really do have an effect on the person that they become.
Right.
But it's also a matter of choice. Like these awful, awful things happened to him. Like there's no question that Lotor would have turned out better had his parents been physically capable of empathy.
Of course.
But they're kind of zombies, so it's an issue.
There's nature
That's
versus
not the weirdest
nurture.
thing I've said
but-
today. That's not the weirdest thing I've said today. But even after all that happened, he made the choice to go, you know what? Fine. Violence it is. And
Right.
leaned super hard into that curve, even while he was still going, oh no, I don't want to mess with my Galra heritage. Oh no, I'd rather be an Altean. Oh no, this.
Right. And that's, I think that non-cleanliness of like where he fits in like the villain category or the hero category or the character that's going to be redeemed, or that is an area that we like to play in and sometimes does not have the answers that everybody's sort of hoping for,
Well, we like to blur those lines, but sometimes, the lines are blurred, therefore the fans have their own interpretations. But ultimately, it's a story, guys. And
Right,
not
right.
everyone gets to have the happy ending in the story.
I will say he was beautiful. He had beautiful hair,
He did.
and him and Allura together look beautiful together.
This is very
You're
true.
treading on some
But
dangerous
I will,
territory.
that isn't from a story perspective a sort of place to work back from. If that makes
But I
any
mean,
sense.
like, you ever see those beautiful flowers and then you go to smell them and they smell like death itself? That's kind of that.
It's a hell of a point.
I still ship it, but no, it does not work within the framework of the narrative in any capacity.
Look, there is a universe in which it happened and it was fine.
100%.
This is not that
That's the
universe.
beauty of all our-
Multiverse
yes.
stories, yes. There's an AU where it totally worked out and everyone was happy.
And endless comics to be written. Fanfics,
100%.
go crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and ultimately, it's the memory of what he was trying to do that brings Honerva around.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there was goodness in him. Like you can't deny that. But some actions are really your only way out
You kind
from
of
a
got
story perspective is you gotta kind of pay the ultimate price.
Well, and for Lotor, there was some good in him, but cool motive, still murder.
So
Still
much
Yeah.
lots and lots of murder.
Totally involved a ton of murder.
Yeah. Pretty sure all of the battery Alteans are super dead because I don't think anyone else found that moon.
Right.
Talk to
They
Vanthor
gone.
if you want to hear about why Lotor doesn't get a redemption arc. I'm sure Ramel would love to hear your thoughts on that.
By the way, when that episode came out and when we were getting like the recording, we couldn't stop saying to each other, "Bando!" Like, we love that read so much. Like, and we love that name.
Bandor.
Oh, Bandor.
Well, there were a lot of fun talking about that. There were a lot of fun references to the original series in this season. Like at the very beginning, we actually have a clip from the original series playing.
You don't sound like that. God bless Bex and their
She's the
ability to
best.
sound like that.
Yes.
We, we love the original show, and we always had this silly idea because we play with so many different realities that like, what if in our reality the show it's technically live action to them, and it's being made about them, and so it's like, because here we are making a show that's based on that show,
Right.
and I was like, well, what if that show is based on our
It's
show?
super meta. It's like inverse meta.
It was just funny to us that like we could work it in. We always wanted to work it in some way, just because we love it and we like to pay homage to it. But that like we joked about it, and we actually had a few more references like in the episode. I ended up way super overwriting that episode, so we cut a bunch of stuff, like the rookie writer mistake. But
It was all gold. It was all gold. It just had to go.
yes,
You have to kill your
darling.
darlings.
Yep.
But there was a scene where they were gonna see like the Sven dies scene, and like Shira wasn't there though, but like I think it was like Hunk and Keith were like
Right.
at a little viewing party with like
Right.
Hunk's family, and then they see the scene and they're like, wow, they're really taking some liberties. Like, they were making their own story about the Paladins, and it was just
There wasn't a space hospital.
That's right.
Would have expired. I would not be here right now if that had happened, because I would have died laughing.
Would have been doing this
there was
show
a
on my
version
own
of
this
it.
season.
yeah, it never made it. It never even really made it past like the roughs and storyboard, because again, like I so overwrote that episode that we just started hacking stuff out.
There was also Tim Hedrick did an amazing Pidge in the room, and a lot of like us being so obsessed with him just going like, wah, like if ever something like was like confusing, he would just go wah. We gotta bring in more OG Pidge.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bex's ability to emulate that voice.
Oh, she nailed it.
Oh, yeah, I know. They are just
They're
wonderful.
amazing.
But yeah, we got to do that. We got to have the little nod to like Pidge's outfit and Allura's outfit that like kind of goes by real quick.
Those are so fun.
That
That
was pretty great.
that montage. And then we got Chip at the end, too.
Yeah.
And Vehicle Voltron.
I know, like we're the biggest trolls ever. We're like, here's a show we're never gonna make.
Yeah, that's right.
That and the epilogue about they made the next generation of
Yeah.
Voltron, and it's like, it's happening.
We queued
It's
it up real
happening.
nice for whoever wants to do it, by
you
the
know,
way.
if
Yep.
anyone wants to take that. But so I'm just gonna admit I never watched Vehicle Voltron.
How dare you?
I know, like
Same. I had to Google what Chip was.
but like I did my research, and like there's a cool idea to it there, and my husband and I were recently watching Pat Labor. Is that how they call it? That's how they call it on the thing, Pat Labor.
That's what I've always called it.
They call labors. Pat Labor
Yeah,
is what we'd
Pat
always
Labor.
call it.
Yeah.
But they're called labors, and it's this like cop mech show, and it's really clever. Like, and it's fun because they have mechs and they're cops, and they just kind of episode to episode do cop things. And I was like, well, if you're gonna
In
make a
mechs.
Vehicle Voltron, you've got these 3 teams. They could basically be like cops and mechs, and like
That's right.
it would
Just
be a lot of
described my
fun.
dream show. Oh my god.
But yeah, we queued it up, and Chip, I loved the idea of like Pidge's one goal in life, going out into the world and seeing sentient AI, like to create one of her own.
Right.
And she's doing it like with her brother, and it's this like nice bonding moment. And then the fact that Chip was like what, Pidge's cousin or
Yeah,
something?
that's right. In the
Cousin
same
or
scene.
brother. I believe it was brother,
Was
but
it
it was
brother?
like in the loosest.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
really
I thought
just.
it was cousin.
It was.
It may have
Two,
been
it might have
brother.
been cousin.
Well, I mean, Sven had a brother that they found later on.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
little hard
there's
because
that.
they started cutting together different series to continue Voltron, so
Yeah.
it's hard to say.
Yeah.
It just made a lot of sense that she would pursue that, and that would be her passion. Technology is her passion, and then with her family and them obviously being such a huge part of the Galaxy Garrison, with Voltron kind of taking itself out of the equation, they would then
Sort of take up the mantle.
yeah, and then
I
the
do
really
think there's a pitch though where Chip ends up taking over Earth as like the sentient AI and becomes the villain 1,000
Hey,
years
man.
later
And it's the
for.
Dude, I was
That's right.
just about to say, like, the dark version is that, like, the Voltron that Sam and everyone creates ultimately is like,
Becomes
the
the
police,
tyrant.
and then they become like the power
Yeah, there
hungry
you go.
Earth of
And
the
there's a
galaxy.
same place.
There's a scrappy Galra resistance.
That's right. And they flip the script and become the good guys. Yeah, that's good.
There you go.
Living long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I don't
I
have enough
love that
time to get
target.
into how much I love this AU because we are going to run out of time here in a hot second. There's so much I want to talk about, and I'm having such a hard time deciding things.
Talk about Allura.
Oh, Laura. She
talk
had
about
such a
Allura.
rough season. Incredibly well telegraphed. Very rough.
Yeah.
For sure. I think, we knew, like, coming down to it, that with Honerva being the final villain, and basically we have two female Altean people who have had a very similar thing happen to them. They've lost their families, they've lost, like, the life they knew, and it's just two very different ways of how they handle
That's
it.
right. They've had in a weird way, similar circumstances and come and approached it from very different angles.
It's a storyline we wanted to originally do kind of with Keith and Lotor
Right.
back when, like, our kind of original story pitch where Shiro was going to kind of exit the show, Keith was going to be here, he was going to stay with the team so he wouldn't have jetted off and gone into the Blade of Marmora, and it was going to be a big, like, Lotor season where you've got Lotor, half Altean, half Galra, Keith, half Galra, half
Earth,
human.
yeah.
And it's
Ooh.
like, you've
And
got
they
these
sort of
two,
were-
the duality of
Yeah.
those two, and, like, how does it work out? And you see Lotor seems like the guy who has it all together in the beginning, but then ultimately Keith evolves and becomes a better person. So we got to play a little bit of that here with Allura and Honerva, who very similar situations, but Allura going about it like the way that it's painful to her. She did lose her entire family. She lost her planet, her home, and even now there's that sense in the first episode where she realizes once this war ends, she might not even have like her Voltron family. It's like they have families.
They're
like
all gonna
what
go
are
on
they
their
gonna
ways.
do? They don't need me anymore. And it's this kind of it's selfish in a way, but it's beautiful because she can feel that way, but she's not acting on it. She's
Right.
not
Yeah.
sabotaging
She's
the
allowing
war
herself
effort
to feel it, but
to,
not.
to keep them, which I would have loved to do that. That's a nice, dark, sick, twisted version of like, Allura's sabotaging the war effort to keep her Voltron family.
There is a universe where that happens.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it was just beautiful to kind of see how much she was willing to take on to herself.
And at the end of the day, like, we keep sort of using this term boys' toys show because that's sort of the reality of what we came into. We sort of were taking on this franchise that was very merchandise based and trying to sell toys to young boys, essentially. And at the end of the day, it became this story, almost Allura's story solely when you really sort of like step back and look at it. But it was this sort of face off of two strong women that were approaching these problems from very different angles. And who the heck would have known that would have
Yeah.
that would have been the
I think we didn't
outcome.
even really know it at the
we
beginning.
didn't we really didn't. It evolved.
But yeah, it was nice. It was nice because when we told Kimberly, and of course she was sad, and we're like, listen, we know it's never personal. We're not like, I don't like that Kimberly. Let's kill her. Like,
At
it's
the
never
very
that.
last minute.
Yeah. But it's like,
We also told Neil
we told Neil, and we try to be kind and like let people know, and so we let her know ahead of time, so she's not just reading the script and like, what the hell? And she was sad, but we just let her know, like, listen, it's Allura's story. Like, she is literally the hero. She's not dying to further another hero story. She is the hero. Like, this war ends with her.
With her, yeah.
And then I made her a completely fake promise that I couldn't really make her.
I don't even think I know what this
Because I
promise
have
is.
no control over what they do with Voltron, but I was like, listen, if we do any more episodes, I'm bringing her back.
Right.
I'm not making this show without her. But then, like,
'Cause there
I
is
have
no Voltron
control.
without
I have no
Allura.
control what they do with it after this point.
But there is
8 seasons, now we need a movie.
honestly, like the sort of post credits thing was leaving that door open.
Yeah.
With the lions taking off and seeing the Allura Nebula, I think in our minds it was
Yeah.
sort of her quintessence coalescing and
reforming, essentially, kind of coming back together. So you can do whatever you want with that. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
have
it
fun,
was-
guys.
Yeah, but honestly, it was a door left open. Like there's nobody ever really dies in comics and
It's-
animation.
I feel like comics and animation and sci-fi in and of itself is a door left open.
Right.
Yeah.
If the word sci-fi exists in a definition of your show,
This was
there's
like
a door
one
left
step
open.
back from the ending of Iron Giant. It was like we didn't actually like show all the pieces going in the thing.
Yeah, there's
But
an
it was-
Allura hand that's just like crawling through space.
Allure's hand is jumping through the snow.
That would have been terrible. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I think there's this misconception because Allura is a woman of color, and so I think a lot of fans only looking at it superficially were like, oh, the woman of color was killed off, and it's like. Yeah, there is a trope of people of color dying to save the stupid white people around them. Like, I understand that trope. But the problem with that superficial interpretation is that they're ignoring the fact that she's the main character here.
Well, there's that, and also just to put it on the table. Our original pitch was that they were all gonna die, and that got taken off the table for.
It's teamwork.
It's teamwork.
Voltron. And honestly, like in my opinion, that would have been an easier like window to bring them back if they all disappeared.
Exactly.
You could pop them all back anytime and you got
Right.
the team again. Easy spin-off. But
So it wouldn't
Sorry
just
if,
been
like, the
like
boards have
a
blown
litter of
everywhere.
bodies. It would have been just disappear.
It would have
were-
been, yeah.
okay.
We're not
Yeah.
showing like, look, we showed
not
the
showing
melted like
Lothar.
Lothar body, but
it would have been the
Nobody's
same,
getting Cronenberged in this scenario.
same scene
Except
except instead of Allura taking it upon herself, they all would have agreed to do it together and they would have gone in and essentially taken Voltron out of the equation. 'Cause
Right.
that was something that we actually really believed. Even from early on, we introduced this idea that Al4 had helped to create this thing, not realizing how dangerous it could be. Kind of like the person who created the atom
the
bomb,
atom bomb.
and like having that guilt, and so having Allura be part of the team that took Voltron out of the equation, and now that weapon isn't available to anyone. That was a big deal. But we were told that was too sad.
You broke chat. Alexis is in chat going, rocking back and forth, broken. Like, congratulations.
Yeah,
everyone take
that
a drink
is
of your
line of
non-alcoholic
gibberish
beverage
that
of
she
choice.
typed.
But
Oh
I
no,
will say
everyone's
that,
just
like,
losing their noise. It's great. I love it.
It was in a strange way, I think, a beautiful sacrifice that Allura is allowed to make, and also really when you think about it, if it had to come down to any one person, she's from like a logistical standpoint, she's the only one powerful enough, and we've sort of demonstrated it through
It's
her
the
being a
only one-
life giver.
So we've had a lot of characters like who've been on like the death table. We've thrown them all out there at some point,
Right.
But they all had to kind of get thrown out at a point in the story where it made sense that their death would have like been worth it. Like for Pidge, it would have been saving her family. Like if
Right.
she had died to save her family. For Hunk, it would have been saving Earth, which almost happened.
Hunk was like
And
inches away.
yeah, we got a yes, and then like, they're like, who are you gonna replace her with? And we're like, a lady, and they said no.
Yeah.
What would
And by
Rommel
the-
have been the pilot?
It would have been. It was gonna be Aksha.
Yeah.
It was gonna be a redemption arc
Yeah.
that took place over this last season. Of it's not about who you were, it's about who you are, and the fact that she's done some bad things, but she truly believes in doing the right thing and
Right.
moving forward, and she could have been a viable part of that team.
But I also would
That's
argue
incredible.
that like there's
Wow.
just there wouldn't have been enough time, I think, for
Yeah.
everybody to like absorb that. If we had like a
Yeah.
3-season run at like bringing her in, getting her settled, and then having her, that would have made more sense.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
a
But Hunks was especially tragic.
hesitation.
Like it was the moment where they were taking the Roby stuff, and there was like that ticking time bomb going off, and he literally sees his family, but he's never actually like interacted with them, so he only gets to look at them.
Oh my god.
And see that they're alive, and then he's like, I gotta get this thing out of here.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So sorry, everybody.
No, but he didn't die. He didn't die. We
didn't
didn't kill anyone.
Speaking of dark storylines, Princess Pony in the hashtag did some fan art of Evil Chip.
Oh wow.
Very fast
So
and
check
very
out
good.
the hashtag ABTV Voltron to check that
Yeah.
out. It makes me very happy.
Are there red glowing eyes?
No, it's black and white, but he does look very happy.
Yeah, but Allura's death was the only one that made sense from a power standpoint, and even from the story standpoint
Yeah.
that we were setting up with Honerva. And then also just on, I know like it's probably going to be highly contested, but on a feminist level, from my standpoint, the man is always one who gets to be the hero. Like Armageddon, Bruce Willis sacrifices himself to send, friggin' Ben Affleck back. And like
Right.
if basically Keith had gone like, I'll do it, and then Allura had to stand on the sidelines and be like, good thing Keith saved the day, I'd not be happy. Like,
No,
I
this
want
is-
my women to be able to save the day too. And even if it's about making that ultimate sacrifice, if people want to interpret that as sexist, then that's fine. But we're just gonna have to agree to disagree.
I mean, Keith tried
Well,
to do the heroic sacrifice at one point, and it didn't work.
and you guys went, no, don't do that.
Voltron was just like, excuse me.
We tried to kill Keith.
This
though.
this was
That's not a
you
lie.
guys apparently tried to kill
did kill
everyone.
everybody.
We did.
Um,
Well,
attempts
because
were
we were
made.
told we couldn't kill Shiro, and like, well, we don't need two leaders. We'll kill Keith, and they said you can't do that.
Hey, but also, by the way, look, we're not kill happy people. We don't kill for the sake of killing. We're like, I think
was a
there's
journey.
something. It's a journey, and there's something meaningful to I think everybody's death. And so when you even look at like melted Lotor corpse, like he basically had done to him what he had done to so many other people. So there's like a sort of a give and a take there.
Yeah.
You know?
I love it.
and like a show where, and I don't want to rag on any other shows that skirt around death or anything like that, because again, they are writing for a certain demographic.
Sure.
But I always appreciate when shows have, actions have consequences.
There's consequences.
And sometimes character death is a really good way of conveying that. And I think for a lot of other people forget that Allura in season 1 is the same character that picked up Shiro, threw him out of a room right as the doors were closing, and basically could have died in that moment.
That's
She
right.
was sacrificing herself. So it's not like this is out of character for her.
Yeah, and Corinne said like 15 different times, like, what about the risks? You could not come back from this if you give all your quintessence to the Balmera. If you give all your quintessence to making this gigantic wormhole to transport Zarkon's ship, like
Right, if you take the darkness
and
into
every
yourself.
time she would say, like, I know the risks, and
YOLO.
Kind of, sort of, right?
Until she walks into the West with the other elves.
That's right.
Exactly. Or Into the Void with Honerva. I love that she had to do a hard reset on Honerva's brain, and then we could fix things. Like, she's the
Pretty
only one
much.
that would have been able to do that in any capacity.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's allowing Honerva to maybe experience the consequences that came as a result of her actions and really understand what those.
But
what that
it's
meant.
allowing her to get past like the cloud of all of the pain she's felt
Right.
and realize, like, remember the good things, because
Right.
sometimes you can get so bogged down with the negativity that you can forget what it was that you loved about a thing in the first place.
Right.
And she was Altane, and she loved discovery, and she loved knowledge, and she reached out with Alpha, and she helped multiple people before they started this Quintessence Comet project that kind of messed everything up. So she just kind of had to
she
show
had
her
dreams,
these
she
things.
had, a heart
Yeah, at one point.
at one point.
Is there anything else that because we're hitting the end of
we-
our time. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on now, or should we save a few things for next week?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think Lauren made a really good point in that, sometimes you sort of lose sight of the good things for, maybe some of the negative things. We'd only hope that, the sort of big post-mortem from the fandom at large, even those that are super unhappy with the way season 8 turned out, sort of looks back on the series with positive feelings, because I think while feelings might get hurt and people might feel betrayed by like story decisions, like the show was made with nothing but like love and good intentions and positivity. And yes, we told some hard stories to tell, and characters came to certain conclusions that weren't like the most popular decisions, but we were just trying to tell a story that like looked beyond the campiness and beyond the colorful robotic silliness, to tell something that felt a bit more true and a bit more real, and had, as one of our execs would always say, stakes and consequences.
No, stakes and urgency.
Stakes and urgency.
Stakes and urgency.
Stakes and urgency.
That was going to be a
restaurant.
The food court
That's
mall.
right.
That's one of Breakfast Sal's new chains.
Yeah.
It's part of Hunk's Food Empire. Stakes and urgency.
But we can leave all the other stuff for our other show.
Yeah. Good times.
Yeah.
And Princess
very
Ponies
excited.
has made a new version with
Red
red eyes.
eyes, red evil eyes.
You asked for red eyes, and in chat they went, "Oh, red eyes!"
That's awesome.
And all
Very
for the red
nice.
eyes. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us this week. This has been absolutely lovely. Are there any other projects you're working on that you can tell us about?
No.
Okay. NDAs it is.
I am working on getting my floors redone.
Yes.
And getting the popcorn scraped off of my ceilings, which is a lot more expensive than I realized it was going to be. And moving all of my crap out of the house so that these people can do this work. And that is a hell of a project that I would not wish on anyone.
And I just took a week off with my wife to Marie Kondo our entire house.
Dang.
So she didn't come over or anything, but we definitely...
Did you actually put it all in a pile?
She did with her clothes,
But
and it was pretty epic.
Okay.
Like, my pile went to your sister to eBay off. So that was
Oh, right.
my pile of toys. Like, her sister's a
Anything
sweet
that
human
makes you
being,
enjoy.
and like, will like, yeah. During the course of Voltron, during production, like super weighty, dark times, I would just go on like eBay and just be like, buy, and a pile of toys stacked up behind me that I never opened up.
Yeah. He
Retail
had a
therapy.
cardboard box for it.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
And then he had a kid and said, "Oh
Why do I
no,
have
I don't
all
need
this?"
all this stuff."
Yeah. That was
And return to sender.
it. Yeah. Cool.
That
Yeah.
sounds fun. All right.
eBay. There you go.
Where can the people go on social media if they would like to keep up with you?
All of the same places. Art of Lauren M on Twitter. The best Lauren Montgomery on Instagram. Though I will say, the Voltron posts are like kind of over at this point.
Yeah.
So don't maybe follow me now if you're just coming for Voltron. You'll probably be a little disappointed.
Same for me. JDS 247 on something and JDS 77 on the other thing. There you go. Underscore in between those.
So I'm gonna unfollow you guys now because
Yeah, it's over.
And that's fine.
But if you like any of my other artwork, you're more than welcome to stay.
I like all of your other artwork.
All right.
It's so pretty.
All right. Thanks again for coming, you guys.
Thank you for having us. You
Yes.
guys have been awesome this entire
And
time.
we'll be back next week.
That's right.
Yes,
Yay!
we will. I'm gonna save that little announcement for a little bit. Megan, where can the people find you?
You guys can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at the Menguin. That's TheMenguin. I really wanted to say, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Mark and Emma and Alexis, who all were in the hashtag tonight. We miss you guys and we love you, and
guys are the
hopefully we'll be
best.
seeing you soon.
And on the live chat in Alexis's case.
Love you, Alexis.
You can follow Yellow Lion Mark Donica at Mark B. Donica, Red Lion Emma5 at Emma5, and Blue Lauren.
Yeah.
Blue Lion.
It's
Alexis
I'm sorry.
at ATORS890. I am Katie Cullen. You can follow me all over the social medias as well as on YouTube and Twitch at Kiaxet. That is Kiaxet. I am also on an Overwatch podcast called On the Point. Guys, we will be back for the final episode of ABTV Voltron. Next week, we are doing a series retrospective. Same Lion time, same Lion channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.